Hey everyone, this is Wei and welcome back. Let's draw these cups and I'll go over some of the very basic but very important lessons for drawing. So let's get started and I'll talk about the process along the way. Alright, so let's draw some cups, and I know what you're thinking. You're probably thinking this is too easy for you, but believe me, if you're a beginner artist, this is very, very important because the cup is kind of like a basic geometry shape, and a lot of more complex things are basically just a bunch of simple geometries put together. So, all right, let's get to the cup. And so, all right, the first thing you want to do when you're drawing these cups is to be able to make this kind of elliptical. Okay, and this is very important because if you're drawing, too sharp, and a lot of beginners, what they'll do is, let's say you're drawing like a tire or the surface of the cup, they'll actually draw like this, right? Or the curvature is kind of odd, and what happens is, they end up doing these little corners way too sharp, and that's just not how an elliptical goes. Okay, so that's one of the major errors that I see when people do this kind of simple geometries. So there's actually quite a lot of round curvature right around the side. I mean, it gets a little bit more and more steep, acute, but there's still curvature there. So don't ever make it sharp like that, because that's gonna be wrong. So that's one of the first points about drawing anything like this, like a cup. All right, so let's continue on with this. Just gonna go down, and this is another challenge too, is to make something that is symmetrical. It's actually very difficult, and it's not an easy thing to do on both sides. All right, so you can see it's like my curvature is slightly different on both sides, and that's just I mean, symmetry is tough. Just try drawing a vase. If you're doing like a vase, you have this curvature here, and try to do it on the other side. It's actually a very difficult thing to do. So let's just go with it. And then another important point about drawing a cup like this is the bottom. When you're doing the bottom, it's the same curvature, right, as this, but smaller, right? In the case of this cup, because it tapers in. What you want to do is you want to draw in that. Like actually sketch in, what is behind the cup. Don't stop. Don't just come down and go around, because you're gonna miss the curvature, of this thing. So if you actually shade it in, like, sketch it in like this, you get a much more accurate curve. And this is a very important point. It's like whenever you're drawing something that's three-dimensional, try to sketch in the back too, because that will give you a lot of you'll be able to visualize this whole shape a lot better. All right, so let's rough in the handle, and then we'll get into shading this thing. And I don't have to draw it, super accurate, obviously, because it's just a cup. I just kind of want to talk about, how you can shade something like this. Okay, so this is almost like an ear. Okay, so once we have this, and we can outline it a little bit if you want. I am using a 2B, so I won't be able to go too dark. So let's just start shading this. Okay, I'll go over some of the more important stuff. Okay, this lip, there's some volume to it. Okay, so let's see, it comes out here. I'm not gonna actually draw in this whole line, because it's not really, the line is not really there, is it? This is a very smooth lip on the cup, so we're gonna define that more by shading. Okay, so here is the lip. Okay, so you can see how there's so many reference lines, even on something as simple as a cup. All right, so we're gonna shade this, and now this is round, obviously, it's a cylinder, so this part here is gonna be dark. And you can see that on the reference, right? So this is gonna be dark. It kind of comes all the way down. It's a little bit of reflective light right here, but I don't know if you guys can see it. But let me give this a quick shade first. Okay, very rough. I mean, there's a lot of spaces in between, right? There's not necessarily because it's still early in this shading stage. So this part right here is dark as well, and there's a little bit of reflective stuff from the handle, which is, because this is either, some kind of ceramic or porcelain. So this is a reflective surface. Okay, so here's a light shade on this. And then let's do a little bit on the top here too. It's a little bit, it's darker up here. Okay, and then now the inside, this is where it gets a little bit tricky, right? Because the inside here is dark and it's a gradation. So you have this one edge right here that's dark because light is hitting, it's not hitting this part. And this is where it's gonna give actually your cup a lot of three-dimensionality to it. So this lip right here, okay, and the inside is a little bit darker. This is, in here is a little bit darker because the lip is a little bit lighter because it's a rounded surface, so it's gonna catch some of the light. Okay, and then right here I'm gonna make it, yeah, let's push it one step forward. Let's go ahead and do that. So I'm gonna push it a little bit harder here. Okay, cross hatching. So I'm shading here, near this lip here, a little bit darker, and that gives it a lot more contrast, from the lip. So now you kind of feel that, this lip is actually coming forward, right? So you get a little bit more and more realism as you do these kind of little shadings. So let's go on to the other area. So right here is a little bit darker because the lip is wider, and I probably need to go in and maybe erase some of this. A little bit harder to do here. Just kind of erase out a little bit of that because the lip is white. Okay, so I'm gonna make this even darker. Okay, so now you're starting to feel the volume of this cup, right? So you see this cup is actually not very easy to draw, is it? I mean, if you want to do, like a nicely shaded cup, it is not that easy. I mean, but it's such a good exercise. So right here is a little bit darker. According to this photo, I mean, it's obviously they cropped it out from the background, so this part right here is not getting any kind of reflection. All right, and so let's do the handle. Let's see, this is a little bit darker. Okay, because it's kind of the same thing like on this side, right? This is right here is dark, and then this is dark. Then the handle right here is dark, where it connects. And I'm using a 2B, so I'm pushing down into the paper, and you can see that it's not very dark. And this is actually a little bit tricky to do because there's a very slight gradation, and you kind of need that, these edges to be a little bit darker because it's a round surface, right? It's like a tube. So if you don't draw the edges kind of dark, you're not going to get that effect. So this is a little bit tedious. Okay, but I won't go into it too much. Okay, so now I'm just kind of outlining a little bit, not too much. All right, so it's still very light. So in order to make it more realistic, you just kind of go in and shade a little bit more. So right here is darker. I know there's some highlights here too. You can. So for highlights on the cup, you can actually just kind of circle it and then shade around it. You can do that. Okay, so this part right here, this is distinction right here. This is darker. Okay, so that would be your cup. All right, let's do another cup, and this one is kind of similar, but I'm gonna use a 6B so I can show you how much quicker you can do something, how much darker you can go. Again, you know, it doesn't have to be very exact. Okay, so here, here, and here, right? So now we have the right curvature. This part could be a little bit steeper. And, you know, don't worry about these guidelines. I mean, it's actually very important to have them. It's the whole sketching process. If you want something nice and neat, you know, after you do this, you can always go in and erase things out. But it's not, believe me, the sketch lines, you know, you should have it there. You know, don't worry about it too much, especially if you're just learning to draw. I mean, those things are actually a necessity. It's by having those sketch lines, it shows you that, you know, you're thinking about the process correctly. You're not trying to, you know, do this kind of stuff. Okay? Like, we don't want to do that. We actually want to be very loose. We want to be able to see things clearly, you know, see things behind and see, you know, major curvatures and lines. All right, so let's shade this, because, you know, I just kind of think you guys kind of know the process already. I'm just kind of shade it without too much guidelines, and you can actually do this. Because with a 6B is actually, yeah, could be very nice, very fast. Okay, so I'm leaving that, and then here we have the darker edge. Okay, now this edge is not as dark as the other edge, okay, and we want to have that kind of distinction because the light is kind of on this side more. All right, so I'm just gonna shade it, giving it a rough coat. And then let's do the bottom here. See the curvature? Very important to have this kind of nice round curvature there. Okay, and then here. Again, big strokes, very loose. Okay, big strokes. Like, you can actually go around it if you want, you know. See how it's going out? It's okay as long as I have that, right? So now you can just kind of curve it in. So try to work big. It's very important, you know, leave the strokes big like that. Move your whole arm, don't just move your wrist. You know, drawing is it's a full body sport. All right, so here this side's darker, so I'm gonna go, and there's a little bit of highlight right there, right? It's bouncing off from the handle, so I'm just gonna draw like a little line here. So I'm gonna leave this area kind of, you know, much lighter. So I'm gonna sketch it in. Here is the darker surface, curvature. It recedes back. And, you know, if you're having problems shading like this is all related to hand control. You know, don't worry about it. You know, the more you draw, the more you're gonna be able to have this kind of hand control. So if you know, if you're watching this, you're probably you know, more beginner artists, and it's normal to have really poor hand control, but as you keep drawing, you know, you're gonna be able to control your strokes very well, and you'll be able to, you know, push it in hard when you need to, like this, and then also, you know, push in lighter when you need to. So don't worry about that. And yeah, try to draw smaller too. If you're having problems shading, you know, because when it comes to shading, the larger the surface, you know, the more hand control you're gonna need, because it's a lot harder to shade consistently on a large area. Okay, so over here, dark, and the edge recedes, so it's a little bit darker. Yeah, with a 6B, it's just so much easier, you know. Because it's like one stroke like this, I can actually, you know, a couple of strokes, you can get a nice gradation, right? So here's the edge, and I'm just gonna lightly go around it, and that'll give you a nice gradation. So, and if you don't have this kind of 6B pencil, it's okay. I mean, it still works with the number 2 pencil or whatever you decide to use. You just take a little bit more shading, you know, a little bit more time, because your strokes will be thinner. All right, so here's the base. Let's go. Yeah, I was hoping to do this a little bit quicker, but okay. So let's see. Right now, I'm just kind of filling in and seeing what some of the shading on the cup, just kind of refining it. The lip right here, I can actually exaggerate it a little bit, and that'll give you, you know, more of a white on the top, so you feel the, you know, you feel the curvature a little bit more. And right here is It's a little bit darker too. So it rounds away. But this part right here is dark, so I'm just gonna push in. And you can see just by pushing that in again, you know, it just really gives you the shape of the cup. And here it is the highlight again, so I'm gonna circle that and just kind of shade around it a little bit. Okay, so yeah, 6-speed much more fun, you know, than the 2B earlier. It's just faster, looser. So that way I'm able to show it to you a little bit easier. Okay, so I'm just kind of refining it. So it's like once I have this kind of base shape, you know, shading in there, now I can go in and just kind of clean things up if I want to, right? So you can make it as detailed as you want. All right, so yeah, that's about it on these cups. So very important, you know, I think the major thing I kind of want to go over with drawing this kind of stuff, this kind of beginner lesson is like very important to be able to do ellipse, you know, just keep doing that, try to get nice curvatures and draw things behind, you know, this, yeah, you need to be able to show that. So don't be afraid to draw things that are behind. You know, you can always just go in there and erase it out later, or even not, you know, because sometimes when you're shading, it'll automatically cover it anyway. So, okay, so that's one of the major things I want to talk about. Drawing things behind and drawing ellipses and then some very basic shading stuff. So I hope this helps. I'll definitely be doing more of these kind of beginner tutorials, but again, you know, they're beginner tutorials, but they're really, really important. That's why it's worth going over. So, all right, so that's it for this video, and I hope this helps you, and if it does, please do give me a thumbs up, and I will see you next time.